Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Grid Shift podcast. My name is Alex. I'll be your host as always. Um, Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Sonny Trinh from Devstream. Before we really get rolling with Sonny, though, I also wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, like I do every episode. I am the founder and CEO of Profit Access AI, where we help clients bridge the gap between AI systems and real implementation. Make sure you stay till the end of the episode. Make sure you follow my guests and leave a comment, like, and subscribe. And you can also check in the comments for a link to get your own free AI assessment. So let's kick it off. Here we are with my guest, Sonny from Devstream. How you doing, Sonny?
I'm doing great, Alex. Happy to be here. So thank you for
Awesome.
having me.
Awesome. Good to hear. Good to see you again. I know we had a brief chat before we decided to jump on and do this together. But there were a few things that stuck out to me. So I'm just gonna ask you some questions. We can free flow into different areas, but I definitely have some questions about you and your business and what you guys do. So really just starting the conversation, if you don't mind, just share a little bit about who you are and who Devstream is.
Sure. No, thank you, Alex. Yeah, so I'm Sonny Trinh. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Devstream. I have an engineering background and I worked in semiconductor for, gosh, nearly 3 decades. And during that time, really was interested in sustainability as well too, and just kind of seeing how the world was evolving with climate change and so forth. And noticed that there were a lot of companies that were doing things that are eligible for something called carbon credits. They were whether it's renewable energy companies or energy efficiency companies, and they were struggling competing against fossil fuels. Essentially, fossil fuels was so inexpensive at the time. Even now, with the increase in pricing, it's still relatively inexpensive. And the way they really helped bridge that gap was to utilize something called carbon credits and to help really finance some of these projects and some of these technologies as well too. And that's how, the DevStream started was to really take advantage of this asset, and starting with carbon credits, but there's other environmental assets as well too, and to really help these companies to advance further and really propagate it. So that way we can start addressing climate change in a much more broad and global way.
Awesome. No, and I know we talked about how you're very mission and vision driven with this. And one thing that stuck out to me on our prep call was you mentioned how companies are really sitting on untapped environmental value, right? And they don't even really realize or understand it. So one question that I do have is, where do you see the biggest disconnect right now between sustainability efforts and actual monetization?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's one that's been really a big part of why sustainability hasn't been as successful as it should be. Sustainability, really, what it does is creates long-term diffuse value, where monetization, it really requires something that's more short-term. So something that's attributable to cash flows. So we look at it as sustainability is it's distributed across society, right? So the world benefits from it. It is realized over long-term horizons, a lot of long-term projects. But companies, they need immediate revenue. They need clear unit economics, especially if you're public, right? Because we live life on a quarterly basis. Devstream is a public company, so I know that firsthand. And so what we're trying to do is use assets such as carbon credits to help bridge this gap. But there are challenges that's we're seeing right now. They're structurally weak. There's price volatility. There's credibility concerns. There's been some bad actors that has caused some issues with the uh, the credibility of the whole carbon market, and there's still limited institutional trust. And then if you look at the time horizon mismatch that I mentioned before, right? Sustainability ROI is typically 5 to 15 years, where capital markets, like I mentioned, they want quarterly, maybe in a 2 to 3 year horizon. So that's the biggest disconnect between the two.
Okay. And being that kind of piggybacking off that question, but being that you're one of the founders of Devstream, and you've obviously been deep in the infrastructure and energy side for a while, when did you really realize that this was an opportunity? Like what made you go into this opportunity?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, when I was in the semiconductor space, I worked with lots of companies, hundreds and hundreds of companies, and saw that there were companies, like I said, who were doing things that would be eligible to generate these environmental assets. but they weren't generating it. And this would help really propagate their technology. And on the flip side, there are also a lot of other companies who are high emitters or through their operations or through their manufacturing and so forth that will also need to buy these assets, these carbon credits. So there's a gap to make the connection between the two. And so what I saw the opportunity was to be kind of the middle person, the bridge, to help generate the assets for the companies that are eligible to do it, and then companies that need it to find really good assets that they can purchase and in order to reduce their carbon footprint.
Okay. So for someone like me, right, who isn't as well versed in this, let's try to break that down simply for the audience. How does Devstream actually help organizations turn these credits and things into revenue streams, like you said? Like how are they able to do that?
Yeah, so the way we look at it is Devstream sits at the monetization layer where there's the bottleneck I mentioned, and there's that gap, right? So you have a company that is doing something that reduces emissions or reduces their energy consumption. So, for example, we have a company that, or partner that is able to take any HVAC system and reduce their energy consumption by up to 30%. Well, if you are in an area that has really dirty electricity, so let's say you're in a third world country where electricity is either run by diesel generators or coal power, every megawatt hour of electricity used is going to have a significant amount of emissions. Well, if you go and implement this technology into, let's say, like a whole hotel chain within that country, that's a significant amount of emissions that is reduced. So for every ton of reduction, you're eligible for one carbon credit. And so that's where we come in and we kind of identify here's an activity that this company does. And there are methodologies that are allow it to generate these assets called carbon credits. Then on the flip side, we have companies that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint. In some regions, it's a compliance requirement by the government. In other areas, like in the US, most of it is voluntary. So there are companies that want to do this because shareholders are demanding it or their customers are demanding it. So they're looking for good projects that generate high quality carbon credits that they would buy. So we would help generate the credits and then find the buyers to buy these credits and make that connection as well, and then ultimately monetize it. And a large portion of that money would go back towards the project, help propagate it, and really help advance it even further.
So you really simplify that whole process and help people actually achieve that as a goal.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And another thing that we had talked about a little bit, which I thought this was more of a thinking edge that you had, but you had talked about more of an integrated approach to environmental asset management. And so what I want to ask is for the audience and people listening, what do you feel that most companies or even maybe your competitors, what do you feel that they're missing when they're trying to approach this space or this area?
Yeah, really, the biggest piece that they're missing is that when you approach these type of projects, especially for carbon credits, it's actually quite complicated. There are a lot of steps involved, and there's a lot of pieces that you need to essentially become an expert at. And so that's why I see a lot of companies just kind of walk away because it's hard to gain this expertise. And at the same time, there aren't many experts. There's just not a lot out there right now, and especially on the technology side. The way the carbon market has evolved really started, and the majority of it has been around nature-based projects. Again, it's not a right or wrong. I believe in nature-based projects as well too. And when we do need to make sure we take care of our mangroves and our ocean and our forests and so forth, because if we don't, we're just going to dig a deeper hole. But that's how the market evolved. And so on the technology side, there's just not a lot of experts, a lot of companies that can provide this type of service. And not only that, like I mentioned, there are a lot of pieces that are complicated. So we come in and we provide a full turnkey service if the customer needs it, where we identify the activity, then we do the calculations, we identify the methodologies, the right registries, create the documentation, and so forth. And I mean, there's a lot more steps to it than that, but we are able to do that. And I'm not saying that, we're an expert in every single of those pieces, but we do have a strong ecosystem of partners that can fill in those gaps as well. And essentially, we can become a really good general contractor for this space.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you explaining it in easy terms for me to understand as well, because I know a lot of people in the audience, they're business owners, founders, manufacturing in this space in renewable energy. And I think it's good just to kind of level set and give some real context to what it is that Devstream does. So, um, market timing is something that's huge, and I know that this industry's been around for quite some time. I can think of projects that I had done in previous careers where we retrofit and did things with solar and different light systems and things like that. And it really was a big benefit for us as an operation. But what do you think what makes this moment different than maybe 3 to 5 years ago? Like, where do you think we're at right now? What makes this timing different?
Yeah, no, that's another really great question. And a big piece of it is that the monetization piece, it really is starting to work because there's a few areas where the gap is closing. Number one, what we're seeing is a lot of cost savings disguised as sustainability. So I mentioned the HVAC solution from one of our partners, right, where you can reduce energy consumption by up to 30%. Well, as energy gets more expensive, that 30% right there, that cost savings is significant. So even if you don't include the carbon credits that you can generate from that, also now that's looking like a very viable solution on it sitting on its own. Then when you add carbon credits on top of it, that's icing on top of it, the cake, and that makes it, become a no-brainer. So in this case, even without carbon credits, again, depending on the region and how expensive electricity is, the payback period could be less, could be a year, year and a half, even 2 years. So, you have a 2-year payback period for any project. That's pretty significant.
That's great.
And then this can last for 30 years or however long the HVAC system lasts, right? And then you sprinkle carbon credits on top of that. Also, like I said, it becomes very, very viable. On top of it, you have technology that's become more efficient. You mentioned solar. Solar is way more efficient now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And as a result, the payback period is now becoming shorter and shorter. And as electricity cost increases, that also makes the payback period shorter as well too. And then lastly, you have regulatory driven revenue as well. So there's things like tax credits, like the IRA in the US, and you have compliance markets, like in the EU, for example. So now the government is really enforcing it and making it and almost penalizing on one end that if you don't meet certain emission goals, you're going to get taxed. On the flip side, there's also the carrot, where, like I mentioned, like tax credits, if you do certain good things, you're going to get paid through the government tax credits.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense to me, especially because of my background. So, um, really, I think you have a very strategic vision from what we talked about on the last time we met. And one question that I want to kind of wrap up with, and maybe we'll talk through a few more things because I do have some other questions now in my head. But if we zoom out, how do you see the role of companies like Devstream shaping the broader energy and infrastructure landscape over the next decade or so?
Yeah, that's a really important question as well. If this model is successful and it scales, it'll really restructure how infrastructure and energy is financed, built, and valued. So take a look at today. Infrastructure is built through large upfront CapEx, long payback periods, and limited developer balance sheets. If we do this correctly and the shift happens, well, projects are now designed from day one to generate tradable, contractible cash flows through these assets. Financing becomes much faster, becomes more modular, more repeatable, and the infrastructure itself starts to behave like a financial asset, not just like a one-off project. So think about solar. You mentioned solar before. So you have a solar farm. In the past, it's just about power generation. How many cents per kilowatt hour can you generate? But now, if you bundle it with the energy, the carbon credits, the data, and package it into a yield product, well, that becomes much more attractive. And then in addition, you have the rise of what I think people call micro infrastructure at scale. And typically, in the past, you're only looking at large projects that gets financed relatively efficiently. But there's a lot of smaller projects, like I mentioned, the HVAC system, you do one building at a time. Well, large institutions aren't going to finance one building at a time. But now you can aggregate these projects together and add in all the different assets I mentioned before to the monetization layers. So now you have small distributed assets becoming viable because you have much more scale by aggregating all the different little pieces. So you look at things like I mentioned, building level efficiency upgrades like the HVAC systems, right? You have, even smaller waste energy systems, EV charging networks, even all these things, when you aggregate it, becomes much more viable as well too.
And now I guess I could ask this question before the one I just asked, but really for Devstream and for you as the founder and an executive and really the CEO and leader of the company, looking ahead to the next 12 to 24 months, what are the signals or the trends or the things that you're personally watching out that'll tell you if Devstream's on the right trajectory?
Yeah, like any other company, we want to generate meaningful revenue from our long-term agreements. We
Okay.
have quite a few agreements, and so those take a significant amount of time to come to fruition. So we're focused on those, and we have new projects that we're working on. So the goal is to close additional large contracts, and also help our partner expand their technologies to larger markets, to other regions, to have a broader impact. Like I mentioned, again, I use the HVAC efficiency technology. We're looking at several countries that we're working with the government to take this into and really expand it on a very broad level. And what that does too is it helps generate revenue for our partners, but also generates additional assets such as carbon credits, which in turn provides revenue for both all the parties involved.
Okay. So not really a huge difference between you and a lot of traditional business. It really does come down to
Right.
generate. No,
Yep.
and that's why I asked the question because you never know what, I mean, a lot of people have different metrics and KPIs, but I think you said it best. Like at the end of the day, when you're publicly traded, it's comes down to quarterlies and what you report. So are you seeing, and I'm going a little bit off of our conversation from before, but are you seeing any shifts or anything major in the industry right now?
Like I said, there were some in the carbon market, there were some bad actors before. So a lot of companies were becoming a little gun shy, concerned about reputational risk. So I guess what you can say is the market and the industry itself is getting cleaned up, where there's a lot more stricter requirements to make sure that the data is accurate. It revolves around data. You mentioned AI as well as, that's something that you do. AI is going to be a big part of this to help drive a lot of this data collection and
Hmm.
ensure that, what we're seeing is more accurate. I'll give you an example. When you're generating carbon credits from like a reforestation project, that's really challenging because you really don't know how much carbon impact 100,000 acres of trees and forest is going to how much carbon reduction is going to occur because every year is going to be different. The trees grow at different rates. You have things like pests and termites and so forth. Sometimes trees fall down. Sometimes there's fires. So how do we accurately measure that and do it in a way that is that companies that are buying these credits can trust? So these are all things that is evolving as well too. So things are getting a lot more precise. And I'd say the market itself is getting cleaned up, and that's really, really good for everybody.
Because that was kind of going to be my follow-up is I'm assuming that has a positive impact on your business and your growth strategy, like kind of removing some of the bad actors, as you said. But how does that how does that or how will that impact your industry as they clean it up, as you said?
Well, so the past couple of years has been challenging because the buyers have pulled back, right? So it has hurt the industry in general. But it's one of those things where, you feel some pain before the gain actually comes.
Mhm.
And where it helps us is that, we're going to be one of the ones last standing because we, number one, being publicly listed, it makes it a lot harder for us to do things that are fraudulent. And there's bigger penalties, let's just say that, than as opposed to a project developer from a third world country. And then secondly, we work mostly on technology. Technology is much more precise than nature based. It's not a better or worse. That's just kind of how it is. Like the HVAC, again, I use that as an example. I can tell you exactly how many kilowatt hours less an HVAC system was using because of this technology before and after. And then from that, you can calculate down to the pound or kilogram of CO2 that was reduced from this through the data from the grid and so forth. So it's much more exact, much more precise, and in that way, the buyers of the credits can have more trust on our calculations.
Okay, so really it by you being one of the good actors, right? Using your analogy to bad actors, right? What you guys are doing is different from what a lot of these maybe other players have done and kind of left a bad taste in people's mouth, right? I mean, am I tracking that correctly?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a lot of there were a lot of bad actors. There's actually a lot of great project developers. It's always, one or two bad apples that
Yep.
spoil the barrel, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the reason I'm getting at that is because I'm wondering, as a company, and this is important for all companies, right? Having established metrics and KPIs. And I notice with a lot of people that I help, that's something that's lacking. So I do want to ask you as a business, like, what are the important metrics and things that you guys are focused on improving so that you can continue to level up?
Yeah, I mean, other than the typical financial metrics that any public company requires, revenue, EBITDA, and so forth, we look at the projects that we're signing, number of projects, how many carbon credits or other environmental assets like IREX that they would generate, and then how fast that's growing as well too, and then being able to turn around and monetize and sell those. And then we also help project developers that are able to generate their own environmental assets, so we can help broker and sell those as well too. So we look at those metrics. But all at the end of the day, it's all about the assets we can generate and then the revenue we generate from those assets.
Growth, what continued growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And for people that are listening and watching the recording of this, 6 to 12 months from now, where does Sonny want to have Devstream at as a business?
Uh, well, of course, we have some fairly large contracts that we've announced, and we have hopefully we'll be able to expand on that as well too. But some of these contracts by then, or it would be great to have them generating these assets and allowing us to monetize it on a steady, regular basis. Because the nice thing about this is that all these projects, when they generate these assets, it's recurring revenue because you're generating it every year, and
Hmm.
and it'll allow us also at the same time to work with our partners that we have contracts with, like the HVAC company, and be able to expand into other regions and other countries and really help them grow as well too, and, and allow us to generate more assets, but really just to help these other regions become even more efficient and reduce their carbon footprint.
Okay. That that makes sense. I think we're probably going to wrap it up, but if it's okay, I always do like to end the podcast with kind of a challenging question because I think it helps other entrepreneurs and founders like yourself really recognize. I mean, we know this from both being in business and being founders and having our own companies. It's not all what we see on social media and Instagram, success stories and tons of revenue and high profit margins. So I do like to ask as a last question for all my guests, if you could solve one major challenge for you today for your business, what would that be?
No, I think for our business and any business, cash flow is king. Whether you get it through revenue, through financing, wherever it makes sense, but you never can have enough or too much cash. So that's something that I always tell, any entrepreneur or anybody who's looking at starting their business is don't underestimate your need for cash. And it's always better to have more and too much than not enough.
No, absolutely. And I can tell for everyone that's listening, rewind that and listen to that again because as an entrepreneur and founder, Sonny is 100% correct. And there's a lot of really, Sonny shared some great insights with us today, but there's a lot of really lucrative ways, a lot of programs that can help your business with that cash flow issue, like Sonny just said. So definitely don't underestimate that. Sonny, if there's anything you would like to wrap up, anything else you'd like to share about Devstream yourself, for the audience, we'll make sure that we get Sonny's LinkedIn, his website, so that you guys can check out Devstream and see what it is that they do. And they could potentially help your business in the manufacturing sector or whatever sector you're in. Sonny and I had a great in-depth conversation before the podcast. And really, there's not really a business or a person or even farming, things of that nature that Sonny and his company can't help. So, Sonny, I'll pass it over to you if there's anything you want to end on. And again, guys, make sure you check out the links below when we post them in the comments in the descriptions, and make sure you connect with Sonny and Devstream. Okay. So go ahead, Sonny, if there's anything you want to close out with.
Well, first of all, thank you, Alex, for having me. This is it's been a lot of fun. And the last thing I'll say is, we hear a lot about global climate change, and sometimes people will question whether it's real or not. But I mean, I live in the Los Angeles area right now, and we're having record heat. First day of spring, we already broke through triple digits, right? It's happening, and hopefully what we're doing will create an impact as well too. And I think we need a lot more Devstream type companies. So we want to play our part, but I think it is really important that we take a look at this and see how we can help solve it. But we need to do it in a way that's economically feasible for a lot of organizations, companies, because that's what's really driving everything. And so that's what we're trying to do is make that connection and turn sustainability into something that is economically profitable, but at the same time be able to solve these major global issues. So again, Alex, thank you for having me and really allow me to say this very important message.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonny. And like I said, make sure everybody follows, likes, and subscribes. I'm Alex, the host of the Grid Shift podcast. My guest today was Sonny Trinh from Devstream, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you.